Welcome to Dark Knight Films Reviews. I'm your host, that's Spease, and today we're doing another ranking video. This time we are ranking the top 10 Hammer horror villains. Now this list came about because it was on my poll right alongside my other video that I did, because you all voted on it the most, and that was the top 10 best slasher villains. But this one was right up there with it and pretty neck and neck in votes. So I decided to do this video as well. Now this one will be slightly different than the slasher ones, because the slasher ones I went with more singular slashers in there. That's why you didn't see Ghostface on my list, simply because Ghostface is not a singular killer. Ghostface is most notably always two killers, with the exception of Scream 3. But I definitely was not going to be putting Scream 3 on my top 10 slasher movie villains. So, what is your list of the top 10 Hammer horror villains? Let me know in the comments down below. And as usual, if you like these videos, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's get started. Starting at number 10, we have The Monster from Curse of Frankenstein from 1957. As played by Christopher Lee, you're going to see his name a lot in this ranking. But it takes a really long time before you get the monster in this film. And then when he comes in, he kills a couple of people. And then he's quickly dispatched and killed by Peter Cushing's Dr. Frankenstein. I really wish that Curse of Frankenstein would have been split into like two different films, to where they could have went ahead and did all the character stuff with Dr. Frankenstein being introduced, and then getting the big reveal of the monster at the very end almost of the movie. And then he goes on a short little killing spree, and then it ends on a cliffhanger. I mean, the film did end on a cliffhanger with Dr. Frankenstein being taken to the gallows, but I think it could have been a lot better had they ended it on a cliffhanger with the monster still alive, instead of just quickly trying to end the film, because it hurt this character, and this is why it's at the bottom of my list, because unfortunately Christopher Lee does not get enough time to shine as the monster in this film. Coming in at number 9, we have Leon Corleto / The Werewolf from Curse of the Werewolf from 1961. Now, this character has got a kick-ass design. He's awesomely played by Oliver Reed. I love the design where he is basically a combination of Henry Hull's werewolf in the original Universal films, Werewolf of London, and a little bit of Larry Talbot in The Wolfman. It's such a shame. He's such a great design of the werewolf and everything, and he doesn't get actually introduced as the werewolf with Oliver Reed playing him until really late in the film, just like The Monster and Curse of Frankenstein. Ironically, both these films have the Curse of Frankenstein, Curse of the Werewolf. But they spend a lot of time, both these movies spend a lot of time introducing elements of the story, which is great, but I just wish they would have spent more time with him as the werewolf. Because as it is, he's a lot like the monster. He gets some time to actually do a few cool things, and then boom, we got to finish this. We got to wrap this movie up. Let's kill him. You know. So that's the reason he's lower on the list than... Because if he would have gotten more screen time and he would have gotten more to do, he'd definitely be higher on this list. Because he was a great design and awesomely played by Oliver Reed. Coming in at number 8 on my list is Dr. Ravna from Kiss of the Vampire from 1963. Dr. Ravna is played by Noel Willman, and he is very charismatic for being played by an actor that you don't really know as well. As this could have easily been a role that was played by Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee, or even Charles Gray. But Noel Willman does a good job in this role. When the couple, Gerald and Marianne Harcourt, come into his town where he is running this cult. A vampire running a cult, I know. It's interesting, different story. But when they come into the town, Dr. Ravna immediately just takes a instant interest in Marianne, played by Jennifer Daniel, and ends up hypnotizing her and making her completely forget about Gerald. And then it is up to Edward D'Souza's Gerald to try and get help to take out Dr. Ravna. And just the way he turns his wife, played by Jennifer Daniel, against Gerald in this, that is just a really powerful villain, and that is why he gets on the list above the previous on my list of Leon and the Monster. Coming in at number 7, we have Carla Hoffman / Megara from The Gorgon from 1964. I just wish that Hammer had just cast Barbara Shelley and had her play both Carla and Megara. As it was, they decided, let's go with 2 different actresses playing basically this same character, because we don't want to reveal that Barbara Shelley's Carla is Megara. Megara is played by Prudence Hyman, and she's great, but I just think it would have been so much cooler had Barbara Shelley been fully playing both roles in this. And plus the character of Megara is so made up, you're not going to recognize that it's freaking Barbara Shelley. And she's only you barely see her when you see her face until the big reveal, and then you see a lot more of her. So I don't think it would have hurt them to have Barbara playing both of the roles in here. But yeah, the great cast here with Christopher Lee as Professor Meister. The real surprise in this one was Richard Pascal as Paul Heitz. I mean, he is... And the only thing I had seen him in prior to this was Rasputin the Mad Monk, and he's playing an older gentleman in this. In this, he's playing his real age. He's playing young, and it was the first time I'd seen him play something like that. And he commands the whole film, basically, for a majority of the film, with the exception of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in here, and of course Barbara Shelley. But to be able to hold your own against those three, I mean, that is amazing. So, the only thing that holds this film back is that Barbara Shelley was not playing Megara as well as playing Carla Hoffman. Because, I mean, if she had been playing both roles to begin with, man. Because this is one of the very few films, once again, that Christopher Lee gets to play a hero. And he is the one that vanquishes Megara at the end. And I just love that. I love to get to see Christopher Lee playing a hero. Coming in at number 6, we have the Carnsteins from the Carnstein trilogy of The Vampire Lovers, 1970, Lust for a Vampire, 1971, and Twins of Evil from 1971. Now, the Carnsteins are Makata / Carmilla, as played by Ingrid Pitt in The Vampire Lovers, Yvette Stensgaard in The Lust for a Vampire, and briefly on screen for maybe 3 minutes by Katja Welf in Twins of Evil. As far as the other Carnsteins, we have Count Carnstein, who wasn't in Vampire Lovers, but he appeared in Lust for a Vampire, played by Mike Raven. And he appeared as a major character in Twins of Evil, as played by Damian Thomas. Now, all of these movies are damn good vampire films. Some of the lore in them is not so good for vampire lore, in my opinion. The whole biting of someone and them, if you don't suck their blood, suck them dry, of course they're going to die then. But if you just bite them, they immediately, their reflection in a mirror disappears and they automatically grow the fangs and become a vampire. It's not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be the vampire bites them, makes them drink from his or her blood, whether it be cutting the wrist open, cutting the chest open, whatever. Them drinking the vampire's blood is what makes them the vampire. But in this trilogy, especially in Twins of Evil, it makes, the vampire lore kind of weird because, the character gets bit and immediately is a vampire. But other than that, Vampire Lovers and Lust for a Vampire are the best of this series, and is the reason why it brings it high on this list. What brings it down somewhat on my list is Twins of Evil is so... your supposed hero that you are supposed to be supporting in Peter Cushing is just as bad a villain at the start of this thing as what Count Carnstein is. how am I supposed to support this guy? And it isn't until the professor character at the school is introduced as a major character in it midway through that Peter Cushing's character starts to finally behave like a hero. I mean, he is torching innocent women at the stake. He is burning these women at the stake for absolutely no reason other than dressing sexy and being sexual with men. Not a good move. Also, another reason this is down on the list is if you're counting, which most records count, Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter from 1974, as a part of the Carnstein stories, which causes other problems with the whole how he defeats the lady that is sort of the Makata of that film that's supposed to be a Carnstein. He uses the mirror in his sword to reflect her reflection back at her to hypnotize her. She has no reflection, dude. That was established in the previous 3 films in this trilogy. So, And also the Carnsteins in this whole series can always go out in during the daylight. That's kind of... What? Okay. But that's why it is at this spot on my list. Coming in at number 5, we have Rasputin from Rasputin the Mad Monk from 1966. Now, I don't have to talk too much about this one because I've already reviewed this movie on my channel. If you have not seen it, go watch that review now if you want to hear more about this. But Christopher Lee, I told you you're going to hear his name a lot in this. He was amazing as Rasputin. He just gives such a solid performance, not just as a villain, but just as a character in here. And plus you have the gorgeous Barbara Shelley and Suzan Farmer. It just brings it down on my list, like I said, because he never got Suzan Farmer's Vanessa. What a shame. Coming in at number 4, we have Karis from The Mummy from 1959. Now, unlike the monster, Leon from The Curse of the Werewolf and Curse of Frankenstein, this is how you do a villain. This is how you do a powerful, badass villain. Karis is there throughout this film, and everything he does in this is intimidating and badass. Christopher Lee playing Karis in this is just imposing as the Mummy. I mean, the shit he goes through in this and just keeps coming. He is just so badass as this character. I mean, it is... I never thought going into this film, like going into The Mummy as a film, that Lon Chaney Jr., who is my favorite Mummy actor at one point, I never thought anyone could be as imposing and as badass as what Lon Chaney Jr. was. But Christopher Lee, he did it. He did it. And playing the character with the same name as my favorite, with Lon Chaney, with Karis. So, I love this movie, and that is why this badass mummy, one of the most badass mummies ever in cinema history, that's why he makes my list at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have Dr. Jekyll from The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll from 1960 and Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde from 1971. Now, in The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll, Paul Messi is... I mean, he looks similar to me with the, more scruffy-looking character to his look. Once he takes his concoction that he's created, which, ironically, in a really cool manner, different than any other version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he injects it. He injects the serum into him instead of drinking it from a potion-like. And then, still playing the character, but without the facial hair and without the, messed up kind of hair look. He has the more good-looking. So it's a reversal of what we normally see with Jekyll and Hyde. Hyde is the sexy, charismatic guy, and Jekyll is more the just, I wouldn't say ugly, but average, or not as, more rugged looking, like myself. So he goes from rugged looking to just full on good looking and handsome. And yeah, while he is in Hyde mode, he is charismatic, but at the same time, if he doesn't get his way, he gets very violent and very mean in here. I like the film. I like Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll. That's why it bumped him up on the list, because there are 2 movies that Hammer did like this. But I do think that Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which, listening to the title, you would think this was some weird, goofy Mel Brooks parody. It is not. This is a serious film. Ralph Bates is amazing as Dr. Jekyll. And Martine Beswick is equally as badass as Sister Hyde, Miss Hyde. And it's great casting, because if you look at Ralph Bates and then you look at Martine Beswick in the transformation scenes that they do, I mean, they look very similar in a lot of ways, facial features wise. So the transformation, it's believable. It's believable that Jekyll changed into a woman and then began calling herself Hyde then, because you can see elements of Jekyll's face in Martine Beswick's Hyde. So great film, and unlike the other one, Jekyll is resorting to some nefarious means, and he's killing people to get his serum to... And unlike Two Faces, he's actually drinking it. He's drinking a potion, basically, like the classic stories. But that's not a bad thing. I like the classic version, and I also like the way Two Faces did it with the injection thing, because it made it a fresh, new take on it. So, but, I mean, with these 2 films together, that is the reason it is up here at my number 3. This is a great, two great films. And but I think Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde is the superior film out of them. But together, that's why they're at this spot. And coming in at number 2, we have Count Dracula, from various films in which Christopher Lee played the role, for the most part, except for in one goofy edition in Seven Brothers. Yeah, never mind that one. But unfortunately, I do have to include it a little bit, so that's why he's not making my number 1. But I love Christopher Lee as Dracula. He is amazing, especially in Prince of Darkness, Taste the Blood of Dracula, and Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. Those 3 films in this series, I mean, that's the reason he's right up here. I mean, some of the other ones weren't quite as good, and some of them were pretty bad. But with those 3, and some fairly good films with Scars of Dracula and Dracula AD 1972, it's serviceable, those films were. So that's the reason Count Dracula makes the number 2 spot on my list. Before I get to my number 1, here are a few honorable mentions. Dr. George Bonnet, The Man Who Could Cheat Death, from 1959. This character is played by Anton Diffrin. He's okay as a villain, I guess. He's just not a villain that I would ever put on my list, just because he's just more a selfish character is all he really is. Yes, he does kill people, but he's just a selfish character. Christopher Lee, again, is playing a heroic character in this, and he's the one that is responsible for bringing down Bonnie in this. And of course, you have Hazel Court, lovely actress. Did a topless scene in this. Only made it to the European versions of the film, and unfortunately, we can't see that version anymore. Such a shame. Anyway, my next honorable mention is Tabitha, from Shadow of the Cat, from 1961. Tabitha is a tabby cat that witnesses the murder of her master, poor old woman, who changed her will at the last minute and angered her husband. And he ends up arranging to have her change her will and then has her disappear and killing her. Tabitha witnesses the whole thing. And then Tabitha plots her revenge. I don't really consider Tabitha a villain in this, even, she's taken out these asshole characters that were responsible for her master's death. Good for her. A great film. Barbara Shelley, again, is in this. Not playing a bad person, thankfully. She's one of the very few good characters in this, and, she is just awesome as usual. If you have not seen this film, see it. Just doesn't make my list as top villains because Tabitha's not a villain. She's good. Next is Parson Bliss / Captain Cleage from the film Captain Cleage from 1962. This character is played by Peter Cushing, is again, much like Tabitha, he's not, I mean, he is portrayed almost as an anti-hero. And I can't put an anti-hero on a horror villains list. So, unfortunately, Captain Cleague, aka Parson Bliss, just does not make the list. But it's a great film. You should see it. Next up, we have Professor Petrie, is played by Herbert Lom from The Phantom of the Opera. He was basically the Phantom of the Opera in the 1962 film. And he's too sympathetic. They made him a good guy. And the only one that's doing the killings is a mute sidekick to him that helped him after his accident. And he's just not a villain. He's not a villain. So I love Herbert Lom, and I would love to have seen him play a badass, villainous version of Phantom of the Opera, but he didn't do it. Fortunately, he didn't get the chance. Next, on my honorable mentions, we have Squire Clive Hamilton from The Plague of the Zombies from 1966. Now, this character, I was back and forth about putting him in there instead of Dr. Ravna, but Dr. Ravna just comes off as a better character to me than Squire Clive Hamilton in creating these zombies that he's using. Plague of the Zombies is a great Hammer film, but I don't think Squire Clive Hamilton is the best of the villains out of these films, unfortunately. Coming in next in my honorable mentions is the Malay and Anna Franklin from The Reptile from 1966. Now, Anna Franklin has been transferred with this snake creature thing that's making her this reptile of the title, and she's controlled basically by the Malay. The Malay is the guy that is responsible for all the carnage in this film. He's not really a particularly good villain. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good film. The Reptile is still a good film, but its villain kind of lets it down. Great effects on Anna in the reptile look. It looks pretty cool, but it just doesn't make my list. Next on my honorable mentions is Christina Cleaver / Hans Werner in Frankenstein Created Woman from 1966. This one, again, is much like Tabitha. I don't consider Christina and Hans villains. They are killing off assholes that caused the death of Hans. So I don't think what Hans is doing using Christina's body is really a villainous thing. He's an anti-hero. Or she is an anti-hero. So that's why it didn't make my list as horror villains. And then my last of honorable mentions is Anna / Jack the Ripper from Hands of the Ripper from 1971. Now, I loved this film, but this poor girl Anna, I can't put her on a villains list. It's not her fault. And most of the people that get killed in this film kind of inadvertently cause it themselves by waving some sparkly thing with the light reflecting into Anna's eyes and causing her to go into sort of a trance, and then they stupidly kiss her And that's what brings out the Jack the Ripper in her, and she freaking kills them in brutal ways. Whatever, whatever weapon comes available to her. It's a great film, though, but I just cannot put her on my list as a villain, because it's not the poor girl's fault. It's very unfortunate for the girl. Traumatized by watching her mother get killed by her father, Jack the Ripper. I mean, and she's just traumatized by it. It's a sad and tragic story. And yeah, she doesn't belong on a horror villains list. Coming in at number 1, we have Makata from The Devil Rides Out from 1968. Now, if you haven't seen my review of The Devil Rides Out, I talk at lengths of how great Charles Gray is as this villain. I also discussed him quite a bit in my top 10 hypnotic villains. Makata is a character that is just... he's charismatic. He is sinister. And he is powerful. I mean, when you've got all that, no way you're not going to be the number 1 on my list. There's not much more I can say about this one because, I mean, if you have not seen my review of The Devil Rides Out, please go look it up on my reviews and watch it. If you have seen the movie already, or have not, and are on the fence, watch my review. It is an amazing film, and Charles Gray is an amazing and underrated actor. He was more than just a Bond villain. So, there's my list. What do you think? What is your list of the top 10 Hammer horror villains? Let me know in the comments down below. And as usual, if you've liked this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because it really does help my channel out a lot. And another video down, and thank you for watching, and I will see you